Hi, hope everyone listening to or watching this is having a lovely day so far, and thanks for tuning in to the Future of Gaming live stream today, and in particular to this panel, which is going to be looking at Gen Z, the impact of Gen Z and what it's having on gaming communities, and how brands can best reach this audience. I'm MICHAFLA Jefferson, a reporter at MediaTel News, and joining me for this panel we have Adam Harris. Wave, Adam. Global head of the brand partnership studio at the live streaming platform Twitch, where he specialises in developing global gaming strategies for endemic and non-endemic brands. We also have REECE Brown, give us a wave. Entertainment partnerships manager at Twitter, where he leads Twitter's gaming content partnerships in the UK and works with publishers, creators, and esports leagues and teams to bring the best content to the gaming community on the social media platform. And last but not least, we have Jay Richards, who I just consider an all-round Gen Z expert, and the founder of Imagine, which connects agencies and brands with a community of Gen Z consultants so they can get some honest insights straight from the audience itself. So thanks so much to all of you for joining us today. Hope lockdown has been treating you good so far. I just kind of want to jump straight in to just defining quickly what Gen Z is, because I think it's a bit of a grey area for some people. And to be honest, Jay, you're probably best placed to do this one. So if you could tell us a bit about what Gen Z actually is.
Yeah, so Gen Z, the youngest are 7 or 8 years old and the oldest are 25. And you just made a comment just before we started recording. You didn't realize that you were actually Gen Z, which is a common thing. So we speak to a lot of brands, and a lot of the folks that we meet in the teams don't actually realize that they're Gen Z. So brands a lot of the time aren't realizing who this generation are. But yeah, their youngest is 7 or 8 and the oldest are 25.
What's unique about Gen Z? Did they grow up with a certain amount of technology or something?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's 3 key things really. So they're digital natives. So yeah, they grew up with technology, so they're used to updating iOS and stuff like that. They are co-creators, so they really love just creating cool things with cool people. And a final thing is that they are, I would say they are activist zealots. So they absolutely love the planet, they love everything about it, and they really want to make sure they can save it for future generations and stop old folks like us destroying it.
I mean, I can identify with that bit. So let's also talk about what we mean by the idea of a community in gaming. Adam, maybe you can take this first, and then we'll hear about it from Twitter's perspective afterwards. What is a gaming community on Twitch?
Well, Twitch is kind of a gaming community. It started from the basis that gamers traditionally didn't have anywhere to gather. And there's lots of different interests within gaming, lots of different games or kind of people who people were following on different platforms, and they had nowhere. They used to, if you remember back, well, you won't because you're Gen Z, but you guys might. Back in the day when there was arcades, and we would all, people who were into game would go to arcades, someone be playing, people would gather around. That's the first kind of community of gamers. Twitch is the modern day kind of digital native version of that. It's got everything that gamers want. It's a collective space where you can engage in gaming, you can come together and either watch others, because that is kind of a huge part of the gaming experience, or and equally, gaming is a community themselves. You look at all the new games that are hugely successful, the likes of Fortnite, many others of these kind of my daughter, who is 9, so also fits, I didn't realize she fits into Gen Z. She plays Roblox and Minecraft, and these are all social kind of metaverses where, which are communities where people are coming together and interacting in digital spaces. So that, from our perspective, is a community, and Twitch is a gaming community as a whole.
Yeah, and sorry, you've got your audience is primarily Gen Z, is it not? Or you've got a very strong in that demographic?
Yeah, it's hugely strong as Gen Z. It kind of tips over into millennials, but predominantly it's Gen Z, because they love that interactivity that the platform gives you, the two-way dialogue between kind of a broadcaster and the viewer, and between the viewers themselves. So it's got everything that a kind of a Gen Z demographic would love. TV that talks back to you, basically.
Jay, I saw your little hand went up. What do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting what Adam was saying. I think the exciting thing that we found when we spoke to our consultants is, so I was speaking to one guy in particular, and when I was talking to him, I was like, oh, who's your best friend? And he started going on about how his best friend lived in Saudi Arabia, how they'd never met, and how the reason they were friends is because they started playing Call of Duty online together, and they've been playing it now for like 5 years or something. And it was crazy to me that I was kind of like, that's silly, doesn't make any sense. But then it really started to expand my mind about how they look at community, and it really just echoes what Adam is saying. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Reece, what about on Twitter? What's the gaming community look like there?
Yeah, I think really to build on what the fellas were saying, I think the likes of Twitter and Twitch have totally reinvented the idea of what a community is. We're in a day and age where social communities on these social platforms can actually have stronger bonds, as Jay was mentioning, and particularly more influence than geographical or physical communities potentially. And the gaming community, especially on Twitter, is the perfect example of this. Firstly, it's incredibly vast. So you have sub-communities within that. So whether that be groups of people who only play Animal Crossing or Fortnite, or groups of people who are only into esports. It's incredibly vast, like you would expect most communities to be. And in terms of how they use the platform, so what we see from a use case is it's not only a communications hub. So they're not only here just to talk to each other and collaborate, but they're also here to kind of like bounce ideas. They're looking for hints and tips around the game that they absolutely love. They're reacting to breaking news that they can be the first person to share with their peers about. But one of the most important things is actually using the platform to redefine and to challenge things that they don't necessarily agree with. And Jay touched on that brilliantly when talking about Gen Z as a whole. From a Twitter perspective, we actually got an amazing glimpse of the influence of the gaming community last year. I don't know if you guys can remember the first trailer for the new Sonic movie that was released. Yeah. And that is just a great example of the influence of a gaming community on Twitter, where the pushback to this particular release, this was generations of gaming communities who had been waiting to see Sonic on the big screen like this, and were so disappointed with what they saw that there was uproar, especially on Twitter, and they held those guys accountable for what they perceived was an incorrect depiction of Sonic. And that resulted in the movie being delayed and then released at a time with the director going back to rework that and released into something that was somewhat more resembled of what the gaming community wanted to see. So an example of the influence of the type of the community on Twitter.
That's actually an amazing point. I forgot about that, but that was incredible that they did actually. That must have cost so much money to go back and change the whole movie to make Sonic look better.
It's better to do it right.
yeah, it was a mess before. So let's talk about how Gen Z are getting involved in these communities. What's unique about the way that Gen Z interacts with gaming communities compared to how people of different generations do, perhaps? Who wants to jump on that one?
Yeah, I'll take it. The funny thing is, because I can't see anybody, I'm like, are they keen? Are they? I can't really tell. But yeah, I think the interesting thing that we found with our consultant community is that they look at gaming as a part of their mental health, and it's enabling them to keep good mental health. Because a lot of them, when we were recently releasing a report on gaming over the next few weeks, because we did partly on gaming a report with the NFL a month ago or so, and we started to see that our audience was really saying, okay, I'm going onto games, especially during the pandemic, to talk to my friends and communicate with them and have that community, even though I am unable to leave my house. And I think the way they see it is, it far goes beyond the way I saw gaming when I was their age. And I think the way they look at it is definitely very much, it's great for my mental health. It's great for folks that are introverts, because for them, it's a great way, it's a safe way to communicate and talk to others and to make friends. And I know that's how my son sees it. So my son's 13 years old, and he very much loves the idea of being able to game safely from home and talk, because he's an introvert, he's able to talk to his friends in a safe environment. So I think, yeah, they see it slightly different to maybe previous generations.
That's really interesting. Did anyone else want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think like I can relate being kind of the age that I am and kind of growing up with games where they weren't connected online. So I'm very much kind of prefer role-playing games where I kind of single player, whereas my kids and Gen Zs, they want to be part of experiences. They that's why there's 100 people on a map or 150 people on a map in all these kind of battle royale games. That's why there's millions of people on Twitch or on Twitter interacting in real time, kind of with things that are going on. So they want, they're kind of grown past this kind of push content of the likes that YouTube have traditionally kind of pushed at them. They increasingly want to be part of the experiences, a part of the games, or part of the watching kind of collective experience. And that's where you've seen the major shift, because they've only ever known digital environments where they can do stuff with them. Like I only have to look at my TV screen at home, and I've got little kids as well, see the peanut butter kind of fingerprints on the screen of the TV, because they think they should be able to move the stuff around on Netflix. So they like, this is the demographic that are growing up, and they want to be able to do stuff with that digital environment, be part of it, and be part of the experience.
Absolutely. I think Adam hit the nail on the head there in terms of the move away from purely push culture. What we're seeing is that they want to be involved and they want to participate in that. And we're particularly seeing that in terms of how that conversation takes place on Twitter. So what you tend to have is a dialogue, not only between the community within themselves. So we often see great engagement rates, dwell times in terms of content, and also the sharing of content, because they want to be that person to share that information with their friend. They want to have an active involvement. But we're also seeing it in how they interact with brands. They're wanting to have dialogue with brands. They're wanting brands to actually actively take a part and be able to have that back and forth. So absolutely right. We're moving away from a place where it's just feed me the content and then I'll sit there and consume it. It's how can I play a part in this? How can I actively engage? And it's not just happening within the actual games, happening in the conversation around it.
Mm. That's a really interesting point, actually. I'm going to come back to that in a bit. Let's jump on what everyone is probably here to hear about, which is how brands, why brands should care about this, and how brands can interact with these communities, and how they should be talking to them. I mean, Jay, let's start with you. Why should brands care about any of this that we're talking about?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think that with Imagine, this is the reason why we built the business, because for us, our mission is to enable Gen Z to shape their future. And we look at previous generations, the way they worked with brands like Apple and Nike. We saw how Apple and Nike created a culture with that generation. And we truly believe that they pushed the culture forward and enabled that generation to shape that part of the world for them. And I think now our mission is really to enable Gen Z to do that going forward. And I think brands are quickly starting to realize that they need to, as REECE most eloquently put, they need to be co-collaborating and working with this generation to actually do what they're doing. And I think a lot of our consultants come to us and they're really excited about being able to feedback on brands' marketing campaigns before they roll them out, or about actually creating the campaign with this audience and then pushing it out. And I think really brands need to realize that this, as Reece was saying, this generation, they really want to be involved. They really care about these brands. They are very, very mission driven, and they want to be part of the conversation. And for brands, it's not we'll just bolt it onto the end. It's something that should be part of your marketing strategy right from the start. And if you make it as part of your marketing strategy right from the go, you will fare a lot better than brands that we've seen historically. They just bring an influencer in, they create their campaign, they put the two together, and then it doesn't go as well as expected. And a lot of the time, that is because it's gone through 5 levels of senior leadership and nobody really consulted the audience they were actually creating it for. And I think bringing this audience in and working with them reduces the risk factor, because you're enabling them to be involved in the conversation.
Adam, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, no, I think another element of it is, especially amongst Gen Zs, it's very hard now for brands to reach this audience. And it's getting increasingly difficult you've got ad blockers, you've got paid subscription services, the likes of Netflix and Spotify, where people are actively paying to avoid commercial messaging from brands, and it's typically Gen Zs. You've got the death, I'm going to get quoted on this, the traditional media, which is kind of in a lot of pain, should we say, at the moment. So it's very, very difficult to reach Gen Zs. Brands need to have a change in tact, which is this kind of bringing them in, working with the audience to co-curate the content with them and letting them be a part of it. That way, and kind of lean in voluntary experiences, because they don't want to be forced to kind of participate. Make it voluntary, bring them in, and that way brands can kind of bypass a lot of these difficulties that they're having reaching this audience and kind of are able to reach them in kind of a far more effective way.
I love that. REECE, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'm going to come at it from a slightly different angle in that, first of all, I don't think all brands should care. This isn't something for all brands. I don't necessarily think this can be seen as I want to reach a mass Gen Z audience. I know that there's a mass Gen Z audience in gaming, therefore that's my strategy. This isn't like buying a TV spot within Love Island or something like this. You need to care if you want to be invested for a long term, and if you want to be around the gaming community, and if you want to help add value to that. I think there's a number of questions that need to be asked as a precursor. Brands need to ask themselves as a precursor to kind of like moving into the space. And if those questions that you ask yourself come back with the right answers, then you should, when investing in and moving into the space, then caring is the optimum word, as Jay was saying. You need to very much care about the talent. You need to care about the leagues. You need to care about the audience, because that's incredibly important to the participants. And if you can showcase that you do care and that you are in this for the long term, then I think you'll give yourself a better chance for success. But in short, it's not a pure audience buy. Just because you want to reach a Gen Z audience, that doesn't necessarily mean that gaming is the space for you.
That is such a good point. And it actually leads into a question I was going to ask later, but let's just bring it up now. What brands should be thinking then about using gaming to reach this audience? Does anyone want to jump on that one? REECE, do you want to go first, as it was your point?
Yeah. I think, like I was saying, brands that have looked at where they want to be in the long term and where they want to take that brand, and really think about it from there, and then look at that long-term strategy and see if gaming is a space for them. One of the things that we always see at Twitter when kind of like doing surveys around what the gaming community are looking for, one of the things that always come back is trust. So the brands that are going to be involved in this space need to understand that they need to build up the trust from that particular community. And that takes time. Like, trust isn't something that can just happen overnight. So if you're going to be involved in this for the long term, and if you're looking to have a long-term impact, then absolutely. But if this is just part of a 6-month, 1 year, 2 year strategy to expand your audience because you're struggling to hit this particular audience, then it's probably not the space for you. You need to take the time to build up trust with the gaming community, because they'll call you out on it pretty quickly.
Would you say there's any particular brand, like sector, that it applies to, or is it really just whether it fits your brand?
I don't think you have to be part of a particular sector. I think depending on who you're trying to reach, it doesn't matter the sector. I think fintech recently has been a great example of technology finance brands doing incredibly well at reaching younger audiences. Traditionally, we would have seen finance brands struggle to do this. So I don't think it's sector dependent. It's just where you want to take the brand within the next few years.
Okay. Adam, I'm glad you put your hand up, because I was going to say, I know you've done some really Twitch has done some really interesting work with the likes of KFC and whatnot. And I was going to say, what from a Twitch perspective, what kind of brands would you recommend are engaging with your audience? Yeah,
so we're kind of slightly disagree with REECE in that we actually see, I completely agree about the trust element and the gaming trust, but we believe that all brands have a right to play in gaming. Not all brands are created equal and they have different challenges, But we're seeing the likes of, we just worked with Corsadil, for example, a brand you would never think kind of pharmaceutical. But there's always a way. And the thing about the gaming community that is that they have been long overlooked. And they are actually, when kind of the research that we do, and I've kind of probably see a similar thing in their research, is that when brands do come in and they do it in the right way, and it's all about doing it in the right way, it's a validation often for this community. They've long been ignored. Like, you're now seeing the brands like Louis Vuitton coming into League of Legends. Like, who would have ever thought a brand like that? But they're doing it in the right way. They've realized the kind of the social currency of aesthetics and kind of the skins, and they've gone in the right approach. So it's all about have a strategy, realize where your entry point is in your right to play. And no, you can't, like we work with the likes of kind of Kellogg's and who want to do influencer activity immediately. We're like, no, you can't just get a streamer to be eating cereal on stream. It's just not going to go down the community well. So you could build out a strategy, which is maybe a reach first strategy, and then start to integrate them further into the community. So there's lots of brands doing amazing things, ranging from kind of the likes of Corsadil, which was really unique, all the way through to we've worked with Porsche recently to launch a car. So again, like it's very kind of adaptable. You just need to know A, your right to play, and then B, how to behave as a brand when you're in there, which is a really important part. So
do you disagree that that it's not something for brands to jump on in a short-term way? Do you think it can be done short-term?
I think it can be done. We look at 4 elements when we're looking at guiding brands and their strategy. It's how what experience they've got. So if they've got 0 experience, they'll need a completely different strategy to the likes of an HP, who are ingrained within the gaming community. What their tone is. So gamers are like, it's the most meme culture kind of irreverent type thing. If your tone is very serious, you can still be a brand, but you should be authentic to your tone. So that affects how you enter. How relevant your product is to the gaming community. So GSK is not very relevant. People use mouthwash, but it's not as relevant as, say, a movie or a Netflix, where that audience are using it on a daily basis. And then what your commitment level is. And it doesn't matter if you're committed for just a 3-month or a year. It just affects the way that you engage with them. So if you're going to be in there for 3 months, you're going to have to add serious value to that community. If you want to engage them, you're going to have to give them something and understand them and show that you get them. So it's not prohibitive. It's just you have to have a completely different change of tack if you want to do that. Ideally, people come in for a long term, and that will suit myself and REECE kind of perfectly from a business perspective. We want people working with us long-term strategic partners, invested in gaming. It then gives it back to the creators. It's because an investment by brands is validation and puts money in the pockets of the people who are creating, but you can still have from our perspective, a short-term impact if that's what your brand kind of in your strategy dictates.
Jay, what's your perspective on this argument?
Yeah, I think I'm going to play the politician and be in the middle of both. I think I pick up bits of what both of the guys are saying. I think it's very interesting. One thing we've seen from our audience at Imagine is that they are very much. You have to remember that as we were saying, Gen Z are 7 and 8 years old, going up to 25. So it is always going to be a long-term play in some ways. It's going to be, if you're looking at 10, 15 years engaging with this audience, then your brand is going to win over that period of time. But again, because the market is constantly changing all the time, we have some brands that come to us and are like, okay, we're going to create this campaign now, and we're not going to roll it out for 8 months. And I said, by the time you roll it out, it's going to be irrelevant. So it's very much understanding that everything is moving so quickly that, yes, you do need to be doing a long-term play, but at the same time, you need to be making sure that you're keeping relevant. But another key part of it is what I think REECE, and actually both of the guys touched on earlier, is about the trust side of things. So REECE made a comment that he was saying they will call you out on it, and this is something our audience has done to us as a startup. They came to us. We were saying these were our values. This is what we hold dear, and our audience was like, hey, we don't feel like you're holding up your values. And they said this a couple of months ago, and we were like, okay, we took a step back and we really started re-engage our audience and check that out, and it enabled us to really push the business forward. And I think what REECE was saying is so key, that with brands, if they're engaging with this audience, if this audience sees that it's coming from and as Adam was saying, if it's not coming from I hate the word, but an authentic transparent approach, they will call you out on it, and they will do it on social media, and you don't want to go viral for that reason. you want to go viral for the right reasons. And I think it's very much a lot of brands can get involved, and we've had big established banks come to us and say, okay, we want to work with the audience to co-create the banks of the future. So I think it's very much loads of different brands can get involved, but I definitely think it has to be in a way you're going, okay, we're looking at a long-term journey. We understand that it may be done in little bite-sized chunks over the period of time. And we also need to win the trust of this audience to make sure that they're engaging with our brand in the way that we want.
Well, so this is interesting because this all leads into a question I had, and actually that Adam has already touched on, which is, are Gen Z really, do they want to see these communities that they've built? Do they want to see brands in those communities? And I know, Adam, you've said that adds validation for the gaming community when they see a brand in there. I don't know if you want to elaborate any more on that.
Yeah, it's validation first and foremost as one point, but it's the other point that I was making about the creators and the ecosystem of gaming and the influencer ecosystem as well. Is that these communities tend to kind of swarm around these influencers who they love the content that they create. These brands are enabling these people to earn a living doing the thing they love, which is play video games. And that's a really important point, that if there was no brands in this space, these guys wouldn't be earning the money that they're doing. And they're becoming hugely successful, earning like mega amounts of money by doing the thing that they absolutely love, that the community absolutely love. And the community love the fact that this guy who I've been following for years is earning a living doing this amazing thing, which I love doing, which is play video games. So it's validation from one side, but it's an economy effect on the other side, that it's actually feeding these creators to do the thing that they love, which I think is a really virtuous thing.
REECE, how is that from your perspective? Because you have a very different type of style of community at Twitter. Do you think your audience, your Gen Z community, are they happy to see brands in their feed?
Yeah, I think especially when talking about Gen Z, they're definitely open to brand engagement. We had a study recently at the end of last year, just looking at what they're looking for, particularly from brands. And Adam touched on it earlier, but it's the sense of adding value. What can they be doing to add value to what is an incredible ecosystem, an incredible community? At the moment, I think esports is a great example of that. One of the things that we saw in terms of feedback was this notion of the community looking for brands to help support from a grassroots perspective. How can they help grow the community, not just from the top level creators and talent that they can align with to get mass reach, but what can they be doing from a grassroots perspective? You look at historically the way the likes of McDonald's have done that within football, and they're looking for someone to come on board and add value in that sense. And that helps build that meaningful connection to the audience and just show that you're there for the right reasons.
Okay, we are almost out of time. So just before we end, I just want to ask you one quick fire question, which is what are the hottest games with Gen Z right now? REECE, do you want to start? It's been an incredible 3 months, I think, within the gaming space. And not just because people are at home more, but we've seen some incredible releases over the last 3 months. From a Twitter perspective, Animal Crossing has absolutely dominated conversation on the platform. The memes, the creativity around it has been incredible. And we're seeing that it's reaching more than just your traditional gamers, which has been amazing. So for me, in short, I'll say Animal Crossing, because it's absolutely dominated the conversation. Cool. Jay, sorry, do you want to go?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think when we spoke to our audience, there's a lot of FIFA, and I think they've done really well with having footballers playing each other and having basketball players playing each other. So I think sporting games, that's what we think we've seen in our community, FIFA, NBA, and games like that.
Awesome. And Adam?
Yeah, the biggest kind of trend on Twitch has got to be the new Riot game, Valorant, which has just been the most enormous success. The marketing release of it was firstly genius, and they gave it selected influencers, and then kind of gave them kind of beta keys that they could give out and drop on people. And I think it got our second largest ever audience, just behind the League of Legends finals. Like 1.7 million people were watching concurrently this game kind of on launch day. I think it got about 34 million hours watched or something. So it is, and it's not even out yet. It's not even readily available. It's coming out in like 2 weeks' time now because they brought their launch forward. So that game is going to be huge. It's going to be a huge esport, and it's the game of the year, I would say.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining me today. I would love to continue this conversation for hours because I found it incredibly interesting. I hope our audience have found it very insightful. And yeah, everyone who's listening, definitely stick around. We've got some great sessions coming up. And thank you again to my wonderful panelists.